Ladies and gentlemen, now hosting the RizzoCast, put your hands together for Steven Risotto!
What is going on, everybody, and welcome. My name is Steven Risotto. I cover the San Francisco Giants for SF Bay, and I'm the host of RizzoCast, a podcast that features current and former big league players, coaches, fans, media, and others who are regarded as some of the brightest minds around the game of baseball. Today's guest is Kyle Blanks, a former big league player who spent parts of 7 seasons in the Grande Ligas with the San Diego Padres, the Oakland Athletics, and the Texas Rangers. Blanks was a guy known for his stature. He was listed as 6'6" and 265 pounds, and also known for his power profile and ability to hit the ball out of the ballpark. As an example, in 2009, he hit 10 homers in just 148 at-bats as a rookie with the Padres. However, injuries began to pile up, and he played his final game at the age of 28 in 2015. And then while battling through injuries towards the back end of his career and throughout, he experienced a first-hand look at opioids and their effect in baseball. We had an eye-opening conversation about that, how he views the mental side of the game, playing in San Diego, advocating now for the use of cannabis in baseball, and much, much more. All coming up next on RizzoCast. This was a lot of fun. We're going to see Kyle definitely again on a future episode. This is episode number 137. Let's get started. All right, and we are here with Kyle Blanks, and Kyle is nice enough to take some time and join the show. Kyle, how you doing? Welcome.
Doing well. Thank you very much for having me and sharing your time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you bring a different perspective, and we're going to get into it, but a lot of interesting topics that we're going to touch on here. And I guess the first thing that I want to touch on here is I was asking a few people about if they had remembered your career, and they had brought up that you were wearing number 88 back in the day. So, I mean, you were multiple times at the stops that you made. First and foremost, tell me the story about number 88 and how that kind of came about, because it's kind of an unusual number.
So when I first got called up, I was number 22. And at the time, David Eckstein, who was, I guess, prior to that, had requested that, and just I somehow got spit out with it. So I was given the number 8 in lieu of 22. And then the following year, Yorvi Torrealba took the number 8. So I figured at that point, I'm just going to try and pick a number. I don't care. So I need to pick a number that doesn't really appear to have any desire tied to it.
Do people care a lot about that stuff? Like, is uniform numbers like very political inside of a big league clubhouse?
It can be to whoever likes the number. That's why I was pretty indifferent to. I have a jersey, was more my mindset. So, I mean, it's just, that's kind of how especially going through the minors, I need the biggest jersey that typically just has a number on it. And I don't really get to pick that. So the fact that I just doesn't really matter to me. That was always how that was able to work for me. But there are guys that have had a number the whole time. And, having that number is a degree of comfort that, maybe it makes them better. I was never like that. My first number that I remembered having was 29, and I kept that as often as I could if I requested it. But if I couldn't have it, I had 4 different jersey numbers one time. So I just was never really in high school. So I was never really tied down to one thing or another.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're tied to 88, and that's the number that everybody kind of identifies you with. Do you get around to watching Major League Baseball these days? I know you've been out for a few years now. Is that something that you spend your time doing, is watching a lot of baseball?
I really, other than, just kind of what comes across, I guess the ticker, I really don't, other than I pay attention to a few websites, but otherwise I really don't watch much directly. So a lot of my, or all I see are highlights, so but I'm kind of more aware of, this is the best of what you're doing. So when I'm seeing that and then reading stuff, I typically have a little more just neutral view on all of it, like little column A, little column B.
Yeah, and I mean, there's some new rules that debuted in 2023. I don't know how caught up you are with them. I mean, we've seen them for a month: the pitch clock, the banning of the extreme shifts, the disengagements, all of that. What do you think about those rules? Because I know a lot of people wanted to get kind of the game sped up a little bit. Are you a proponent of speeding up the game? And have you had a chance to see some of these rules in place?
So I had a conversation recently with a friend who's a scout, and it was really interesting because basically in that conversation, we were able to get to where this is a variation of the game that can be played, and it's really not for me to judge one way or the other. And I say that I'm not trying to not pick a side or not have a thought on it, but like, I don't remember playing a lot of games that were excessively long when the game was allowed to police itself and when it did so appropriately. So like I also remember having guys I played with, I had a guy I played with who as a starter at one period was someone counted between certain pitches could get up to like 30, 40 seconds. And at a certain point, if you're an A-ball and he's pumping strikes, I kind of don't care. But that's also that balanced out with, he understands that there's a defense behind him. He wants to keep fresh, but that's part of a team working together is trying to find a rhythm that, if a clock helps you find that, whatever. I mean, there's a metronome for music. So, my thoughts are way more open to like, if this is what the rules are, this is the game that's being played. I really don't have a feeling on it because I wasn't the person who took a long time to do my stuff. So other than maybe the inconvenience of some of these rules on the border, right? Being kind of, the percentage where it just sucks or everyone has an opinion their way about it. I was just kind of same way of like, I really loved the human element of the game where I want the umpires to have a really good fucking day behind that plate. So this is just as crisp and smooth as it can go. And that's not going to be perfect. And that's okay because this is baseball. But if now baseball has all of these checks and balances and markers and everything, I mean, I just don't see the same value in them as some people who look at them as a data point might. I'd say that's the bigger part of like all of those thoughts. And data is the product of experience. So everything you're saying that's going to happen is really just something that happened. You don't know what's going to happen. That's why guys have steep declines that unless they're going to tell you or can explain it, you won't know why. It's not necessarily because of the numbers every time. And that's like the shifts. And I remember the shift benefiting me as a right-handed hitter in an entirely different way than I'm not a left-handed hitter, but I also understand the ability to make an adjustment. And I'm not saying you can out-hit. I'm not saying you can just out-hit a shift, but otherwise a pitcher is never, is he throwing into that defensive, alignment? Is he actually hitting a spot when he's throwing into that defensive alignment? All those things are in play. And like, pitchers will miss with a pitch that they get the outcome they want. Same thing as hitters will, get the benefit of the doubt because that's baseball. That's the part I don't really care about the numbers as much, but you still have to play the game the right way. And it's like, ultimately, if you're that good and can do all these things, however well, like you're that top 1%, the Trouts, you're going to outplay any philosophy or data that someone's going to throw it at the game. And it's because you play it and you're able to make those adjustments that the data doesn't support.
Yeah, definitely need more of the human element. And to your point about the umpires, I think I read something that the human umpires actually have a better percentage of success than the robot umpires that they're testing in the minor leagues. So that gives you any idea about what's going on. Let's get into kind of your career a little bit. New Mexico guy. I mean, the amount of big league players, I was doing my research last night, to come out of the state is pretty low. And I know you weren't born there, but not a huge baseball haven New Mexico is. How did you kind of get involved in baseball, and when did you realize that it was something that you were kind of good enough to move forward with in your career?
Well, I was about 8, turning 9. Like I started in the fall and just playing little league, and really just kind of progressed, I guess, as at that time you generally would. I played majors in little league for 2 years. In between that, I would be, playing like A, B, C, or at the time it was USSSA. So, really learning, like, once again, variations of the game, right? Like how do you introduce this the right way? And so, New Mexico is I'd say it just doesn't have very much exposure. It's not given the credit of a lot of exposure. I can't say anything about how it is now. I have no clue. But at the time I was in, playing the game in this state, I was never, there was always, at least a team full of guys I could say that, okay, maybe now I'm in this class of people. Like for the most part, and I don't know what that looks like anywhere else, but, for some of the teams of guys I played with and where they came from, it's crazy that like how quick it's, it's interesting to hear like how hard guys throw there, but knowing like even hearing all these guys, hearing how the major league averages of guys throwing hard, it's not every pitch, it's not every location, it's not all the time. And I think that's where some places get a degree of overexposure. And it's not to say there's so many more people, so I get it, the places you can play year round. So, coming up through that way, like when I got into high school, basically from freshman year out, I really didn't see myself as a standout on a team that did very well. And that was kind of I always, had humility kind of built into playing the game, whether it was, like getting my ass kicked as an amateur professional, like just every level, like, or having success basically at any level, that's what I think I just had constantly reaffirmed. Like I've been no hit in summer ball as a kid. I've been no hit in the big leagues. Like it's no hit in the minors, no hit. It's all those things. Those are the things I think that were far better experiences. So, going from New Mexico where it's very underestimated what can come from here, in my opinion, and that's kind of where like I ended up going to college at Yavapai College. It was I could afford to go there, and I always liked swinging wood bats, so it was nice to know that if this is even a possibility, this is a very good entry point, because whether or not this changes my value, I at least get to see how I would fare against with a wood bat. Like this is what I use. This is what I'm good. This is what I'm intending to use. It's so, even after that year, and kind of working on that transition, I didn't really want to go to college, to a Division I, because I didn't want to swing a metal bat. It was, to me, that I didn't see any value in it, when by the time my draft year came around, I was already in A-ball.
Yeah, and one of the things that we do a lot here is I ask guys their kind of draft story, and there's not even really 42 rounds anymore in the draft, and I think there's more like 20 because they're eliminating affiliates. I know COVID had a lot to do with it, and the guys that are picked kind of in the later rounds, way back when, didn't really sign. But you took a chance on yourself. You signed with the Padres back in 2004. Where were you? Because I know, there wasn't MLB Network back then. I'm kind of dating you a little bit. But where were you when San Diego made that selection, and kind of what do you remember from that day when you were drafted?
So I was a draft and follow, and it was kind of understood, like, I really didn't know what to expect. I didn't have much exposure to that. And that's pretty much why, like, my explanation of my career is I just kind of fell through it. I didn't really have any expectations tied to baseball. I just was like, I got to college with baseball. That was a way greater goal achieved at the time than, maybe where that led to. So I was on a senior trip and got a phone call, like, you've been drafted in the 42nd round. My scout called me, and I kind of knew I was going to college, so it didn't really, I was excited to just like, okay, this happened. Now it kind of validates the decision I feel like I made for that reason. I was hoping something like this would happen, because whether I was drafted or not, going to a junior college, I was draft eligible again. And I don't know if that is, I imagine if you're only draft eligible at a Division I after your junior year, or as a 21-year-old or something, whatever the rule may be now, I was more into, I graduated high school early, so I was still young. I actually, even where I signed, the way the 40-man rules applied, I still qualified as like a high school situation draftee because of how my age, not necessarily that I went to college. So, I was very, I guess it was pretty more of a, like, I'm excited that, because I was going to college with a friend on that trip, and it was just like, okay, this is, part of the reason why I picked going there and was hoping for that. And it, turned into, making a little more sense. And obviously, like I said, I just kind of fell through it, and it was the place I could afford to go. And it was cool, because my summer coach actually made the connection for me, and I ended up going there because like 5 or 6 of us from our summer ball team in Albuquerque ended up going there.
And I mentioned San Diego. I mean, fast forward to, I guess it's been 20 years, almost 20 years since you were drafted, and the town is really popping. All the sports teams left. It's literally just the Padres now. It's kind of a baseball town, and they're good. They have unreal star power. The fans are, rightfully so, going nuts. Did you ever kind of envision Petco Park vibing the way it has been vibing the past few years? Because I know when you were there was a few down years with San Diego, but now it's kind of changed and people are into it down there.
So I loved playing there because of, it packs, and it's like playing in front of a packed house is, I do this. I used to do this for a juice box and some fruit snacks. I'm willing to do it in front of nobody again. That was kind of my view of the game. So it's like the fact of where I am. I loved Petco. Petco's a beautiful field. I'm sure it's been upgraded ridiculously.
Amazing.
Just the weather alone, those things just being, what they are. I enjoyed being there just because, I couldn't understand why that wasn't desirable. Like, we're not trying to, fail or not, have the success you saw us have. That's the crazy part of, like, chemistry doesn't necessarily work, perfectly every day. That's why, my first year up, I want to say the last half of the year, we had a very, very competitive record to the rest of the league for the rest of that year. But that's one of those things of, like, even with the same guys, that's not to say the same magic's going to be there. It's a new season next year. That's why I was never very presumptive when I was asked, like, what do you want to do this year? It's just, I want to do well. I don't have a number in mind. I just, and I've hit $150. I've had a very uncomfortable time going to work, and I don't want this at bat. Like, I'm not ready for it. It's not good. And so being in a place where at least all of the other, variables are super comfortable and very nice. And, like, once again, I didn't like playing in the cold. So to play in a place that's just nice all the time, that's a pretty nice thing to kind of, like, there's no rainouts here today. Like, you at least get to set your watch to playing whether you feel good or not. So when you feel good, you can feel really good. And, it was just, once again, it's like, playing on a winning team isn't what would make the difference for me playing somewhere, because the city is going to offer what it's going to offer. Like, I played in front of a very full stadium there on many occasions that whether that was every night, like that place was a very, very enjoyable place to play. And I mean, the field itself was gorgeous. The grounds crew was always amazing. So like, I just liked being able to live right in the area, walk there, just kind of go back and forth and go from basically hideout to hideout, go from apartment to clubhouse, and just, I'm really just here to play and try and enjoy my time when I have it. But otherwise, I just enjoyed playing the game, whether it was, at the highest level or not. I really just enjoyed the game of baseball, which is what makes it very difficult to enjoy it when the business gets wrapped a little too tightly around it and it's not quite as fun as it used to be at times. So
Yeah.
because going from, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say absolutely. And I did want to ask real quick because we're going to get into that. But they used to have the camo jerseys on Sunday. Did you dig those camo jerseys at all?
I really, really liked the sand. So the sand, if you remember that, was the color. So those, I don't know how anyone else would feel about this. By far the most comfortable pants ever. And I don't know why that color of pants is that much more comfortable, but I always thought that was very unique. And then the camo was always just, I thought that was just a unique, once again, I'm not from here. I don't know any of this. So learning the details of why we have this on, why we, look up to this deck because this whole row has been brought here today to, that's a cool thing that just without me being here, I thought that was always really cool. Whether it was the first camo one or the digital camo, or I was always really, I always thought, why don't you do more throwbacks? Because this has a bunch of, the jersey history and patterns through time in this organization are really cool, but that's not always, how it works. Like, that's one of those, if you want to be mad at the business, like, why can't they do it? Well, because, reason A, B, and C. It's not because we can't, it's because we can't.
Yeah. And I guess, you kind of flew through the system a little bit because you were a guy that was able to hit the ball out of the ballpark, and I guess now everybody in a lineup could probably hit 15 to 20 with the approach that they're teaching everybody now if they played every day. Do you think the game of baseball is way too reliant on home runs? I guess from an entertainment standpoint, and this kind of ties in with the business of baseball. People want to see offense, and the owners know that. The commissioner's office knows that. I'm kind of interested to hear your thoughts there as a former guy who hit a lot of home runs, and now you hear about guys, everybody hitting home runs throughout the lineup. It's not very diverse in terms of skill set from an offensive perspective.
So perfect. So I love the game of baseball. So I don't disparage one valuable statistic to the next. Is that fair to say? If you really love the game, it's all of these statistics are valuable when they make sense to try and capture them, which is as often as you can, which same thing of like trying to express the cadence of how do you play a game without running up the score, knowing it can happen to you just as quickly, like those nuances of the actual game being played. So once again, the game of baseball, which has this objectively, all these stats that are offensive stats are very, very good and valuable. So why are you putting them in certain places like they aren't as valuable? That's like there's so much failure built into the offensive side. Why are you removing more chaos that you can just put into the game? So for instance, like stealing bases is now more prevalent, I guess, because of, it's been encouraged back into the game by a rule the same way speeding it up has. So now if you understand the value of the chaos of what those things create, that's why you're willing to give yourself up to just put the ball in play, because he can overthrow the ball. I don't care how good anyone ever is, they will make mistakes. This game has no perfection. And that's part of what really shapes I think it's the game, when you're not playing it to recover as many of those stats as you can, it lacks a dynamic that's very obvious to somebody who understands the value of those. And that's the part of like, all those numbers don't tell you that. They tell you what happened, and you're projecting into the game what you think will happen based off this. That's the same thing I get to do from night to night. And even that is still, I don't know what pitch he's throwing. And until I take my best swing, I still don't know what my outcome is going to be. I can take my best swing and my outcome is not a great statistical result in my favor, but I might be really, really happy with that. That's part of the, the deeper, like actual game of baseball, when there is no dollar figure predicating what the best thing you could do is for any reason. That's why I enjoy watching like Little League baseball, because there's no incentive here other than just, we're going to get through this game, right? That's the part and the only difference in my head between any game of baseball is how crisply it's played. When you're little kids who don't have a great degree of coordination, it's not as crisp as when you're adult men, and it's very, very crisp because everybody knows where the ball's going. But that's once again, I was told not to bunt as someone who understands the value of why wouldn't I bunt in a time when it could value. That's why I'm always willing to do the best thing for the team, for the game of baseball. But that's depending on the style of baseball we're playing. I may be totally locked out of something that I'm capable of doing, whether I'm the best at it or not. I'm not saying I'm a good bunter, but the ability and willingness is, we're all professionals here. So we all have the ability to basically do everything. When you restrict it, and now when you build in certain markers of success, like velocity and movement and angles, things that don't predicate the outcome, like velocity. Velocity does not a good pitcher make. Like, even pitchers that throw really hard, if they're in the zone but don't know where in the zone, it's not very good. Like, hitters are really good. And my failure, when I became the best hitter I could be, I was very aware of the failure that is acceptably given to me because of what I'm asked to do. So as long as I'm willing to take my best swing every time, or focus on taking my best swing every time, which, once again, strikeouts are the only statistic as a hitter you can statistically work backward from. You remove strikeouts and put them back into your game. It doesn't matter if there's a direct benefit to you. The likelihood is, at least out of 10, at least one of those ball in plays had some degree of benefit to the outcome. Got a guy over, got a guy, something. That's how the game works. That's the part of the thing. On the flat piece of paper, those numbers don't tell you anything. And that's kind of the hard part of it. It's why I don't really watch. It's just not a variation of the game. I love watching pitchers duels. I loved being involved in a pitcher's duel, mostly because at the worst, I'm only going 0 for 3 because I'm not getting up 4 times. But that's also there's also something, there's a comfortable 0 for 4. There's a very uncomfortable 0 for 4. There's an uncomfortable 4 for 4. And all these, there's variations to all this. And that's part of what some numbers give you kind of a peek into, but there's no context to just what's happened until you really understand why it happened.
And you mentioned that you like the human side of the game, and you touched on something really awesome there, where you mentioned you like watching Little League, and because the kids are just out there, they're having fun and everything. And this is something that I've thought about, because almost at every level, there's always an incentive. I feel like, if you're playing at the high school level, you're looking to get a college scholarship. If you're playing at the college level, you're always looking to get drafted. If you're at the minor leagues, you're looking to get called up to single A, double A, triple A. And if you're in the big leagues, it seems like that's the highest of highs. But when you're in the big leagues, guys are trying to make the all-star team. So it seems like there's always this endless stream of individual goals. Do you think baseball is baseball selfish in terms of the camaraderie? Is there such thing as, enjoying being a part of a team and playing as a team? Or is it just very individual based? Because I know 25 guys, 26 guys, whatever it is now, there's always the common goal, and it's to win as a team. But do you see that? Did you see that throughout your career, or was it just a ton of guys doing their own thing?
Nobody nobody's playing to do badly. No one's trying to do a bad job today. No one's trying to play poorly. That's I've really the hard part of the part of baseball I really love, and I was talking with my buddy about it, and I was like, the accountability on the field. You can clearly see what happens, and I think when I was always pretty accountable for what happened on the field, right? Like, just I got sawed off 4 times today and got 4 hits, man. I don't know what to fucking tell you. Like, I don't know. That's baseball. Like, knowing that, for me in Little League, I really had no expectation. That's why I say it's kind of fell through my experience of the game. It's a puzzle. Like, by now I can articulate baseball was always this puzzle of, you're mitigating your failure as you go up the competitive ladder. You're in Little League, if you're really, really good, you almost never strike out. And that basically follows you up to college, maybe, where you then, because you're competitive and you're now thrown in this world, if you continue to be competitive, there are natural balances to that. Like, everybody's susceptible. That's, I love the humbling of baseball. I love watching guys get humbled, because that was my entire career of just, I wasn't trying to get hurt. I was always trying to recover, and I always had to recover from something else after getting healthy. So when you think, it's almost like when it appears you play like baseball owes you something, that's the part of it that I think is pretty, like I said, no one's trying to play, to lose today. And that's the hard part of explaining the dynamic in that scenario is, I believe there's a team of rookies could win the World Series, but the balancing act of what that would take, I don't know. But they're all skilled enough to do it. That's what I was made aware of in that environment. Like, I'm really, really good, and everyone here is really, really good. What I've learned now is the articulation of that is, at our peak performance, we're all basically about as good as each other. Otherwise, the ability to lay that shit down consistently is what separates us. And what separates the best from myself, 6 hits out of 100. And my shit's garbage comparatively. And even, once again, the best hitters' plate appearance tape looks like ass, because most of it, 70% of it, is ass. Like, that was the thing I learned playing the game by the end, was I have this much failure built in. And if I can overlook how it appears, the mental side of a fan doesn't understand what I'm dealing with today the same way I have no idea what they're dealing with today. Like, if I can just approach this in a very organic way of doing it like this, it will probably have the best outcome for me. But I'm just someone who can approach it like that, because that's just how I look at the game. Like, it's the same. I was told in the year I was struggling the worst, I was told by my manager, who I really appreciate for that, it's the same game. It's the same 90 feet. It's the same. It's something I was able to share with other people, even when I'm struggling with the same fucking problem. Like, this is not easy. No one here expects it to be easy. So that's part of, I love the humility that's built into that. I was explaining that to someone I was just talking to. I was the type of teammate that, regardless of the type of shit you're in with anybody else, if you just got fucking shelled or had I might be the guy you can come sit next to, and I'll just pat you on the leg.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a really good philosophy. And I do want to touch on that a little bit, because you played your last big league game at 28 years old. And I know you mentioned that you'd battled through more than your fair share of injuries. And I mean, do you have any regrets during your career? Do you think the injuries are something that, is that out of your control? I mean, do you have any regrets from your career? I guess that's where I want to ask.
No, I would not be talking to you if I wasn't the sum total of those numbers. So I don't look at it like the way I explain if I could change something if I could change anything, it would be the 0 for 20s to 0 for 10s. And I don't need any less strikeouts. Like if you could redistribute things differently, maybe, but otherwise I'm fine with what I did. It taught me what it taught me. Mostly the adversity you face is going to teach you more than the success you have just straight up out of your raw talent. I never understood the faith given to the toolsy guys who, when it's all working together, it's fucking beautiful. But for the most part, it doesn't work very well together. It's like a really, really nice sports car that you rarely see on the road. And that's the thing I started to, for myself, like I was very happy I was able to recover from every injury to play again. That's basically my mark of success, or how I would explain, because outside of that, like my best efforts went into baseball. Like I didn't try and hit a $150. Like that's nothing I would want anybody to deal with, because despite those efforts, the optics are what they are depending on where you're sitting, whether it's the press box or the bleachers. And that's that's the hard part of, that's the nice part on this side of the game, being able to, that's why I don't work in baseball, because I can say these things because they are very real problems that exist. And unfortunately, there's just not many people who want to share that. I'm glad baseball wasn't my only identity or a mask or whatever you want to call it. I love baseball in the game, but when you put a directed incentive behind it, it changes it, and it's not the same game. It's why I love playing. I love playing games and doing things. I don't like when there's like a competitive angle added to it, because I don't enjoy whatever the activity is when it's like, because if I actually try and compete, depending on not anymore, because physically I'm not where I used to be, but depending on at one point, depending on what that activity is, the disparity between your ability and mine might be so great. That's not why I came to do this. I don't enjoy that. That's the kind of the funny part of, like, in baseball, if you played as a kid coming up, you always played against a team that you run rule. And depending on what tournament you're in or what rules you're playing, you might have to run rule them by a lot of runs. And that's not something that, like, if you want to be a competitor, that's not the competition you're looking for. But I've also been that team. I've had that shit run up on me. Like, wow, this gets way better. And then, so the lessons, once I got to that level, a lot more of what I learned was just my inconsistency is what separates me. But otherwise, like, if it's over the fence, it's over the fence. Like, I just viewed the game differently. I never understood why I was told initially you're allowed to strike out more if you hit for more power. Well, why would I care to strike out more? That's never been okay. Why is it okay when I feel like there's a way to make the adjustment and do all of it? There's a precedent of it being done. So I'm just trying to find my path to that. I don't know what stance that's going to be this year, but I was always that guy who appreciated seeing someone who had the same stance every season, because I didn't. I always had something. I never came in with the same feel for my approach or just my stance, or like, it was always, I would get in the box in the offseason and just be like, what the fuck did I do? What was I doing? Because I actually took time off. I wouldn't do something for a while. And then, towards the end, it was a different thing to engage, because I had few bullets. So my first day of hitting, like my last couple of years or last 3 years, first day of hitting in the off season, I'm going to go take like 20 or 30 swings off a tee. And I don't care where they go. It takes me more time and effort to get out to the place to do it than it takes to do the work. But that's what my first day needs to be. Because if I took a buddy out doing on my second day maybe, and I told him, I'm like, dude, I'm going out here to hit off a tee for like 5 minutes. And I was like, if you want to take flips or do whatever, I'll do whatever. And the next day, because he took like a whole bucket of balls, he's just like, oh my God. I was like, dude, I need to be able to do this tomorrow. So I learned for myself, between getting hurt and playing, there's a progression to this that, you can kind of always be in this rhythm of, I know how to throw a baseball, but until I would do it right now, I wouldn't know exactly how bad it's going to feel. But during that period of time, it was like basically within a week of just preparing and working through that process, I'm ready to play. But my fight was just to get healthy enough to actually play the game.
And I guess kind of switching gears here, you wrote in a blog post that you sent me about opioid use in baseball, and I read that Tyler Skaggs' passing kind of really affected you and your decision to speak out about some of these issues. And in 2009, you mentioned that you tore your plantar fascia. I think that's what it's called, right? Weird term for it, by the way. And it kind of started you on the anti-inflammatories, and then a few years later, you had the UCL reconstruction, and then that kind of introduced you to the broader spectrum of opioid use in baseball. And you say that it didn't impact you like maybe it could have. Is this kind of one of baseball's biggest secrets? What did you kind of learn about these substances being distributed in a big league clubhouse that maybe the outsiders wouldn't really know?
So initially, when I first got called up in 2009, all of the medications for the season were kept in-house. And I personally, once again, my experience with all of this was very sequentially like try it like this, very, okay, this makes sense. We keep this here. Like I'm not the person trying to use this for the wrong reason. And so I don't remember if 2010 was like that, but otherwise I'll back up to in the minor leagues, you're pretty restricted as far as treatment wise. I don't know what the prescriptions they hand out anymore are, but I was relatively healthy for the most part through the minors, other than just like sporadic random shit. Like I had a staph infection in 2005. If you look up Big Fall Hard on YouTube, I sprained my knee during that little thing, and that I missed a little bit of time. But otherwise, I never really missed much more than like pulls, strains, getting hit in the hand and just needing a day, things like that. And so I never really engaged much more than general treatment. Ultrasound, anything you'd encounter in a PT clinic, outpatient, just very general. And then, in 2009, when actually even, getting into big league camp, which I still was pretty healthy through those times. So I never really engaged it the way it's going on already. These guys that have been in the big leagues, they're on this, they're already into this where I just don't even know it exists. And I happen to fall into it when I get hurt because, take this. And I always feel like I was given very good advice on why to take this, what I'm taking. And, unfortunately, it's just, even with good health, these things have their limitations. And because even let's say the regimen being handed out appropriately, it has the potential to be abused. That's irrelevant to who gives it to you. And so, just engaging it initially was, I'm always trying to be healthy and get on the field. And ultimately, as a player, your goal is never optimum health. It's to be I can play. Like your goal is to play. And so 2009, that happened. It was, I was still pretty young and didn't really think of that injury as much. So it was in a hard cast for a few weeks and then just kind of a little rehab and all right, I feel pretty normal again. And then Tommy John engaged me a little more openly where I was just given pills. And that was, I want to say even maybe even the surgery where I realized like, I always kind of took what I was suggested to take and went through everything. And when it was gone, I was basically assuming that what was given to me is the lifespan of what I need. So when I'm given these pills and told, all right, now after a few weeks, when those are gone, start taking the ibuprofen and it should actually help a lot more. Now, The first time I actually did that and took an ibuprofen after a bunch of taking painkillers, it worked incredibly differently. Like it felt, I was like, wow, that worked way better. For whatever degree of relief was given to me, it was far more impactful than a painkiller. So for me, I never really had that. Some people have been addicted after getting their wisdom teeth pulled. So it doesn't necessarily take the same thing for everybody. And I always had this intention because, and once again, the support behind it of trainers, strength coaches, like I'm in this bubble to get better and get back on the field. So, the 1 year when I had I think it was 2012, I had my labrum repaired, and we had a ton of guys on the DL at that time. And sometimes I will admit, sometimes just getting to sit in the video room and feel kind of disconnected was all I could do. And but otherwise, once I was done with what I had, I was never pursuing those things away from the field. Once I found cannabis, I was pretty light on alcohol and pretty, to my own devices at that point. And, so engaging in these things, like every spring training, I'd say after, 2009, my goal was to abstain as long as I could from taking any kind of anything, like, Celebrex, any of the heavy anti-inflammatories, anything other than just needing, a little bit of maybe treatment or stretching to get out the door. Ultimately, I want to do this as naturally as I can. And most guys, I will say, traditionally, that's the goal walking into the season. Now, I can't speak for everyone's consumption, which is why, like, the drug conversation is so interesting to me, because I've been on teams, statistically, I've been around enough people where someone has that problem, and I can't say I've been able to openly see it. And that's the hard part of, I was consuming cannabis under the same umbrella someone would have that problem. And I don't know to what degree that's enforced when you have a pill problem or an opiate problem or whatever other problems fall under the umbrella of those drugs of abuse. But at one point, cannabis was under it. And it was the same thing I was aware when I was smoking before I left for the field that is going to be on a drug test if there's someone there to test me at the field. And I'm still playing every day. I'm not getting in trouble. Now, what I've learned after when Skaggs passed, I realized, like, that's how you would have found me if that's what I did, or if that would have been my consumers. But I was never the person. Once I was done with my pills I would go back to my cannabis. So knowing that alcohol is a consistent problem in the whole conversation, it's available, it's everywhere. It's not perceived to be the, contributor to the issues that it actually is. And that's, he was doing the same thing he probably did every day, every road trip, every time. Those things, that's not the first time he took something. It's the first, or maybe even not the first, but it was the last time, because it was not what he thought it was. That's the sad part I had the realization of, is I wasn't doing the same thing, but I go every road trip. This is how I kind of do my thing. And without having the same problems as somebody else, that's one of those things. If you're aware I'm not a pill person, you're probably not going to associate how you have to get those with me. Like, we're not in the same circle. Like, the same way the guys who drink and don't smoke aren't going to stop by my room on the road. So once again, that's part of the problem of like, everyone has something they're using, and ultimately, like, whether it's steroid, like, either let everybody use whatever the fuck they want and educate them on why they should and shouldn't use certain things, or you create problems when you vilify things in a very uneven fashion. Like, if the highest performing player in the major leagues has a problem that falls under that umbrella, are you going to do anything? Are you going to enforce a rule that you didn't enforce when guys were smoking under it? Like, do you care? Like, the same exact thing that I just now, as far as learning why I was able to do that and why it's just, if I'm the only one who's willing to explain that, like, doesn't make me a worse teammate, a worse person. It's just, this is kind of the nature of what I was doing at the time. And I couldn't understand why, you know, why you would do something else, because I was just allowed to do what I wanted to do. You know, that's the odd thing of like the drugs through time, like where by my last couple of years when I wasn't on a big league roster, I went from, in 2016, I was basically rehabbing from a 2015 surgery, and up until spring training, all I could do is drink because I'm not on the roster. And I would go from mornings where I may be able to only go in here and get treatment and leave, and I'm home by 10:30. And there's other times where I can physically walk in and I'm like, I feel good enough to, you know, take some grounders and hit. And that's, one foot might be different one day, different the next. Like, there's zero rhyme or reason to what I couldn't pin it down, and I can't smoke. My goal is set on being able to play. And that requires coming here to do this every day, as well as not consuming certain things. So I'm allowed to come here and do this. And when I was only allowed to, like, I understood that, like, I can always ask for Ambien because I understand how to ask for it. I can always, and I'm never given it in this excess crazy amount, but for something that works very, very well on a night day game type of situation at a time I need it to work, I do need to get some sleep. And unfortunately, if I don't have the best thing I can, you know, care to use, I'm going to try and find the next best thing because I just need to sleep. And that's what's so interesting about when that rule actually changed. I was talking to John Coyles with the JDA. I was trying to talk with the union and just trying to express, like, this is the problem. Like, you guys are the ones who are in the room, and until you guys are all the ones who are able to change the rules, why aren't you changing the rules? Like, unless you tell me we're changing the rules, there's no justification for what you're doing. And the rules that changed did not come with any updates to enforcement. If we find this in your system, there's no dedicated, we have to cut your pay or you can't play. So if the player has a problem, what's the incentive of reporting that? And I don't know what people consume. I know a lot of guys drink. That's about all I can say. And from the information I get from buddies who, you know, are trainers and coaches, it seems like it kind of going down, I guess. Like, there seems to be a different awareness for, you know, the wreckage you may cause yourself. But, you know, I look at it like 10 years before I got in the game, there was way less information about what's good to take. And it was the same, you know, framework of, like, the goal is to be on the field. So if that's amphetamines and steroids, it's fucking that. Like, I don't like knowing it's still happening. Like, guys who don't take stuff are out competing guys who do. That's not going to necessarily separate the best players from each other. But that's, once again, that's the nuance of the game. That's the beauty of the game of baseball, is looking the best doesn't make you the best. Like, and even if that is the case, as a hitter, it's rare that it's every day. As a pitcher, it's rare that it's every start or appearance. And I just always, I never wanted to celebrate something because I've hit a homer and gone 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts after that. What the fuck was I thinking? Like, that was those are the quick karmas you're dealt. And that I've stepped in the box like professionally numerous times and said, oh fuck, because I lost all the feel I had for this. And that's part, like, I don't get to stop. I have to play tomorrow too, and the fucking next day. You know, that's the crazy part of, like, I love talking about the mental side of the game because very few people talk about it from the failure side, which is grand in that game. That teaches you everything that, you know, the success side has a lot of blind spots tied to it because you did it. Well, just do it again. That's the hard part of trying to tell. Like, someone I was talking to who I guess gave lessons or was explaining to me that there's to some degree, some people think if you can emulate what that guy does, you will be able to hit like him. That's not a very, like, at a certain skill level. I've seen dudes take BP in 10 different stances and crush, but they only have one for the game. Like, because of that is a very unique characteristic to that guy's success. That's why it's funny to watch people be versions of others, because rarely it's like it shapes your game, but otherwise, like, when you just give to, like, I never had a stance I could emulate, because it wasn't like, all right, I'm gonna stand like this and get fucking hits. That's not how that game works, especially when that guy doesn't want me to get a hit. He's way happier seeing me not get a hit. That's the part where, like, the strikeout thing, like, we were a coach I had in instructional league. This was a philosophy wise. So, like, once again, to the speed of the game. After a game in instructional league of standing out defensively for like a 45-minute inning, this after the long day of this talk, he's like, pitchers, it should take no more than 150 pitches to play a game. Like, that's the efficiency we should have with the game of baseball. Like, we shouldn't be out here this whole time. This is how many pitches it should take. So which is funny, because now that there's a clock on the game, I wonder how someone's probably done it, calculated game speed. If someone hits a homer and then everybody just times out and strikes out. Like, how long would that take a game?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. Somebody would have to do that. Do you want to volunteer?
But oh, absolutely not. That's just totally ruins it again. But that's the part of, once again, when you want to divide and divide and divide, it makes more sense to, ask more, like, we all can see what happened. Ask more about why. Like, what happened is on the paper. Ask why, and honestly, like, getting to that is a degree of the person being honest with you. Like, I feel good today, or I feel like shit today. But that's a part of, I'm healthy enough to play. I'm typically not going to tell you I feel bad. And that's a big component of, like, I was always more failure oriented to my successes of, like, you can just as easily fail today. So focus on feeling good, and just, you're trying to hit this pitch. Like, you're trying to do this. But otherwise, like, my last 2015 in Texas, all I would tell myself when I get in the box is, like, my loading mechanism was telling myself to step back. And that's, for a period of time, it was clockwork. And look how much I failed. And I felt really, really good the whole time. So to showcase the difference between result and effort and feel, it's like, they're so far apart unless you really understand the game of baseball, when you're really talking about it at a very highly competitive level, because that's exactly why it's like, this dude's not going to have a 0 ERA all year. Watch. It's going to implode. And once again, implode might be 1 run, but that's the thing of, like, that's the difference of 0 and 1 runs is fucking huge. That's what can win a game. So knowing those numbers are just as valuable, like stealing bases, like all these offensive categories are valuable. That's the part of the game that, because once you said offense is exciting. You said these certain things that I don't disagree with you, but when you put all the emphasis into it, because the business does not understand that true baseball fans want to see good fucking baseball. That's what good baseball fans want to see. There's home runs involved in good baseball. There's triples, doubles, singles, strikeouts, walks, stolen bases, all the above. And unfortunately, when you care to put your own spin on what you think the game is, we all lose the dynamics of that. And that's part of why, like, I don't really care to put any effort into seeing much baseball. I honestly don't really have much time that I could put to it, but it's just not necessarily what I'd care to watch. Like, that's the funny part of, like, it's just, I love the game. So, like, I'll get caught watching a pitcher who's just ... I love seeing that kind of stuff, but I don't want to hear the commentary. I don't want to hear anybody talk about it, because you don't know anything about this. Like, you have no idea how he feels. that's why I just like watching it and seeing what happens, because I don't know why he fucking is limping. I won't know until anyone else knows. But or I don't know why he hit a homer today, and he was just, maybe something clicked. But that's part of like being the person that's like in the moment that, you know, I've had that statistic pulled away from me, right? Like lined up the screws on a ball and hit it right at somebody. That's baseball. You know, that's part of what you should appreciate watching it. You shouldn't be upset that there's a pitcher's duel and no offense. You should be excited that that's the game you're watching. Because would you rather watch your team blow out every other team? Is that fun? Like that's the weird thing, is like, I'm a fan of a good game. I don't care what the jerseys are. I just want to see a good game. And eventually, once there's a chasm between the score, I don't fucking care to see this shit. Doesn't matter what sport it is. I want to watch a somewhat evenly competitive match. That's why through the competitive growth years of baseball, it's hard to watch a way less talented team, or like in my case, we were a young team for the league, just get fucking boat raced by teams who are already a little more developed and can do this. You know, that's the crazy part of like those things that separate those levels sometimes are huge.
Yeah, no, really, really good stuff there. And I guess one more, because we kind of went over, but one more to wrap up here. Roadrunner CBD. Tell me a little bit about it, and how did you get started with that endeavor?
So Roadrunner CBD started in 2018, and I stopped playing baseball. I got my medical cannabis card in Arizona and just really kind of dove into that world in general. And when I came across a strain that was a 1-to-1 ratio of THC and CBD, it really struck me in a way that, you know, this would be like if I found a drill that was beneficial to my cage work, which inevitably might lead to a better approach on the field. But that same thing of this stretch is helping me do better. This input is helping do something different than I can really articulate. And so over the next, period of time, I met my business partners. I am a co-owner of this company, as well as a co-owner of Roadrunner Cannabis. And, initially my partners, Bob and Lori Boylan, I met them just kind of generally through my brother. That's his friend's parents, and sharing that passion with Bob. I just, we would go up to Colorado and kind of peruse that cannabis market. And I was always looking for like topical treatments and, things outside of the general thought path of what cannabis is, because of where I came from and the benefits I've seen. So like, if a topical works for you and you put it on, it's just about trying these things. So we kind of rifled through some of the stuff we were just available to us. And then the 2018 Farm Bill was passed. So we were actually given the opportunity to just make our own products. And that was a really interesting kind of point in it, because we do full spectrum CBD, which we've always done, which is there's no THC removed, because we're able to help you understand the potential of why we would leave it there. Just this of whole food, whole fruit, all of that concept is in that. And that's part of where we started, was a little difficult, because in 2018-19, the sentiment around cannabis was not the same thing as it's progressively kind of gotten to now. And, even depending on where you live, it may not make any difference to some people depending on where they live. But otherwise for us, it was very interesting, because as soon as I got my medical card, I was sharing this with any friends I still had in the game, anything like, dude, try this, try it like this. And mostly I had to start there because they could try it without any repercussion. So I could ask a guy on the roster. I couldn't ask a guy in the minors. And I, we really wanted to just make our own products, because we were willing to make something that most people weren't willing to take the risk in making, because if it's a little too potent, it's not hemp, it's cannabis. So at a certain point, that was a very important detail of this has to be done very well. And we've always put that attention to that. So to be able to start in a place where most people didn't really care to deal with, we've, over the last few years, there's been thousands of companies that have just kind of went away because they're not in it for the same thing of all of us involved have some a very different relationship with cannabis, as far as just wake up every morning and put our products are the only products I use as far as topicals. And I have our store now because it is vitamin supplements as well as cannabis and our own CBD. I wake up every morning and put it on to just, I know I don't feel perfect. I know putting something on, it's like stretching before you walk, stretching before you run. It's that preparative routine, part of my preparative routine to approach just what I don't know what I'm going to see today. And, since Skaggs passed away, trying to really just be willing to be more vocal about it. And unfortunately, my bottleneck is typically finding a willing, person to have the conversation with, like in this capacity. So I really appreciate you, sharing. And, but yeah, we've really worked very hard to just try and be that bridge to cannabis for people, because, for how many, everyone's going to kind of time into needing some degree of supplementation or help with their wellness. And that's just, it could be a possibility for many people, in my opinion. But most people I engage, whether it's CBD or THC, a lot of it is they're actually talking to me because they have tried many other things. And what I have to really work hard on is trying to empower them that, look, if you've tried all this other stuff, you've got to give this a go. And at the worst, you're just still where you are, but you're still trying something. And I'm always very, very confident you're going to feel a pretty favorable difference if you are consistent. Think of the difference of, eating food inconsistently in more of a diet style, or having a better lifestyle with how you eat. Those representations are way different. So that's what's been really fun. Now that in 2019 we opened, it's called Verve Health Shop. It's in Edgewood, New Mexico. And it's been a very nice place to help people comfortably have that conversation, because, I had to engage cannabis for a first time at some point. I do engage all the other things I took at some point for a first time as well. That's part of why I always am willing to, be a little more open about those, like the drug policies, the drug consumptions, because I can really only tell you what I took. And outside of that, it's like, I don't even know what anyone else is really doing, because I was just shocked to see something like that happen, because I just didn't expect something like that to happen. But now that it's prevalent, most guys have surgeries. Most guys have a script from a surgery. It's not crazy to think they're able to take something. It's just, that's the part of the greater awareness of, I'd rather someone tell me I'd rather you put the focus into getting guys actually healthy. But the hard part about that is, everybody's always just wanted to get back in the game and play. And at a certain point, I always had injuries that put me down. It's like, if you're not going to play again this year, you basically have this span of time to try and get as healthy as you possibly can, which that's more of the format I'd like to see. But otherwise, I just want the business to treat the players of the game better. It just doesn't seem to be making the efforts it could, when, if you look at the revenue sheet, there's plenty of money there to try and do a little better. It's not the money that's lacking, it's definitely the effort.
100%. And Kyle, I can't thank you enough. I know we went a little over, so sorry for keeping you, but this was a blast, and I really enjoyed your story, and I know other people will as well. And I'm sure they're gonna take a lot from this conversation. So really appreciate you coming on, man.
No, I hope it's maybe a different perspective than the common, one you really get to talk about. I love baseball. I just don't really get to articulate how I feel about it, because I don't want to upset how someone else might feel about it. That's what's been so thank you very much for letting me share.
Absolutely. And everybody listening could go ahead and check out the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at RizzoCast, and then Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcasts. Go check us out. Thank you everybody for listening, and we're gonna have more coming up very soon. And see you next time.